Swami, great to have you on the show. And 2025 is clearly full of macro environmental challenges, beginning with Trump taking over as US's president, chatter around tariff changes, and other major policy changes which are already, in the works. What's your view on the overall Trump trade and its impact on EMs like India?
The real problem is that Mr. Trump seems to change his mind every few minutes. He says various different things at different times. So it's very difficult for anybody to know what is really on his mind or whether there is any consistency at all in the various proposals he does. So as of now, it seems to me that he's very serious about using tariffs against other people. There are some optimists who think that he's just, this is a bargaining position to get a few trade deals. I don't think so. I think he actually is a believer that tariffs are good for America. If that is the case, then we are going to be hit. Let's be clear. Mr. Trump called India a tariff king and pointed out that we had these very, very high tariffs on cycles. I think he meant motorcycles, which to him is like a running sore. I mean, we tried to reduce it, I think, from 70 to 45%, and he was outraged that it can be so high. So I think he's going to go for tariffs, and he's going to hit India also. I could be wrong. Maybe he does this as bargaining positions, and maybe his position softens later on. But I do believe that he is going to start a international trade wars. And if that happens, we will be affected not just by whatever Mr. Trump does, but the retaliations of the other people like the Europeans, Japanese, Koreans. I mean, there was likely to be a series of additional tariff and non-tariff barriers coming up. That will be bad for India. Moreover, if you create such uncertain conditions, in such uncertain conditions, people tend to run to the dollar. And that means people will pull money out of emerging markets like India.
Sure. Hi, sir. Wishing you a very happy new year. But in this new year, the other big event to watch out for is, of course, the budget. So help us understand, what do you think are going to be the key focus areas of the government this time around?
Coming budget, I suspect, will be one of continuity. The BJP theme for several budgets and even in the general election was one of continuity. Mr. Modi didn't promise lots of new things in the re-election. He was boasting about what they had done and how they would continue on that path. So what would we expect? Well, she had said that she will try to get the fiscal deficit down to 4.5% in the new year, 25-26. I imagine that's what it will be there. She has always been in favor of increasing capex, and I think she will once again go for a high capex, although things will not be very easy if she is reducing the fiscal deficit by that much. But I think the revenues are pretty buoyant, and she will be able to do it. I think there is a demand for extending PLI to more sectors. I suspect she may give in to that, although I think it's a bad thing. I think there are already too many sectors affected by it. Beyond that, I expect continuity in most things. She may put some additional duties where it will help some of the ancillary producers in part of the Make of the India thing, or of the Indian companies in the value chains for mobile phones and so on. But I would expect basically a budget of continuity. Yesterday's policies, day before yesterday's policies, they are good policies, they are delivering results, so we will continue on this path. That, I think, is what we will see.
Sure. But help us understand, the other big event which is unfolding is the rapid depreciation of rupee, and especially the ferocity that we have seen of late. I mean, yes, in comparison with other currencies, we have done better because it's all coming because of the dollar strength. But what's the expectations now? Do you see any intervention being made by RBI to stabilize rupee?
In my opinion, the RBI is not doing that much. Beyond the point, in fact, the RBI, I think, will not be able to control the markets because now there is a big offshore market in Singapore, and we would not want to try intervening everywhere. I think what's happening is that because we have such a strong services export sector, the exchange rate, instead of being set by the merchandise goods exports, is now beginning to be set by the services exports. And because our services exports are doing very well, that is why the rupee is strong compared with that of other Asian countries. That is why we have depreciated less against the dollar than all these other currencies. That, I think, is something which is likely to continue. So what's happening is that the rupee itself is tending to be strong rather than because of our strong export performance rather than the RBI intervention.
Right. Swami, amidst all these events, the RBI also appointed Sanjay Malhotra as the new governor. In order to balance between inflation and growth, the RBI kept the interest rates unchanged as well since February of last year, or rather last year, I should say today. But how do you think the new governor will look at this balance? And are you expecting any changes in approach from Sanjay Malhotra now?
Point of time, I would say there is no reason for him to change policies, but some very alarming things could happen during the year, in which case he might have to take action. At this point of time, inflation is just not under control. I mean, we are supposed to be in a 2 to 6% band, and inflation is constantly crossing 6%. Food inflation a couple of months ago was as high as almost 10%. So in these conditions, I do not think the RBI governor will go for any cut in the interest rate, which I think the finance ministry might want. I think the RBI governor will say that conditions are still basically inflationary. And in India, unlike other countries, food inflation tends to spill over into general inflation. Therefore, he can't look at inflation minus food. He has to look at the total. Going by that logic, I would not expect any cut in the interest rate, at least for a couple of quarters. Beyond that, we will have to see how the world develops, how India develops. Maybe things will get better, maybe inflation comes down. As of now, inflation remains a problem, so I do not expect any monetary stimulation of the economy.
Right. Swami, now that we're talking about inflation, a lot has been also said about slowing GDP. What's your take on the growth, and do you think it can revive in the second half of the next fiscal, or rather this fiscal?
As for the current financial year, I would expect that having fallen to 5.4, there will be some recovery. Some recovery, but not a full recovery. You see, the GDP deflator was very artificially depressed in some ways last year, and there will be corresponding correction for that this year. So because of that, I think if you even it out, our total GDP rate might turn out to be about 6.5%. That's what I would expect for the current financial year. Going forward for the next year, I think it depends very much on global conditions. If the global conditions get into a serious problem like a trade war, it will affect everybody and it will affect us. On the other hand, if you have some nice news like a peace deal in Ukraine, that will certainly improve. Spirits will go up. Mr. Trump is expected to give a huge tax cut in his budget. If he does that, and if that stimulates the American economy, and if that stimulates exports to USA, that would be a good thing. But on the other hand, he does not want to stimulate exports to the USA. He wants to stimulate them out of the USA. So it's very unclear in total policy terms what he wants. But I would say that, the situation is not a happy one.
Yes, situation is not the happy one, but perhaps in the second half of the year, do you anticipate some sort of increased capex expenditure at least? Because I mean, that will at least support the corporate earnings in the second half, if at all. Do you see that as a possibility, sir?
That is what I am expecting. That's why I said, having gone down to 5.4, I think there will be some bounce back. And therefore, if the year, if it ends at 6.5, that does mean that there is a bounce back. The government capex was very low in the first half, and there are many signs that it is picking up. The PMI on manufacturing came in quite sharply high a month ago, so that again was a positive sign. So I would expect a pickup in the second half of the year, and I would expect the year to end at something like 6.5.
And Swami said 2024 unfortunately also saw the sad demise of a lot of important people, right? And it just ended with the, unfortunate demise of Dr. Manmohan Singh, our erstwhile Prime Minister. He was, of course, one of the most instrumental figures when it comes to the Indian economy, whether it was the 1991 reforms or what he brought into place with respect to his stint at RBI governor as well. What would you remember as his legacy?
The main thing to remember as far as, you see, he was very important in another phase altogether. He came in a crisis when Narasimha Rao had no idea what to do. And he said, look, I'm hiring you. You please go ahead with your liberalization. If you are right, I will get the credit for it. And if you are wrong, I will say it was all your fault and sack you. I mean, these are kind of conditions on which Manmohan Singh became finance minister. And what he was doing worked. He had Narasimha Rao's support in that. And that's how it succeeded. Now, no ordinary finance minister can do that. To have this kind of thing where you are given a free hand to do very radical changes because there is a crisis. Right now, there is no crisis. In normal times, it would be very difficult to change the status quo so easily. At the time Manmohan Singh started his reforms in 1991, all the opposition parties said, the moment we come to power, we will reverse these reforms. These are terrible reforms. These are imposed on us by IMF. That's what they said. But then, because growth increased to 7% under Manmohan Singh in his fourth and fifth years, all the parties willy-nilly, without admitting it, started following the same path. So, will there be a similar position in which a future finance minister finds himself? I find that very unlikely. So you are more likely to be like Manmohan when he became prime minister. And frankly, he was not getting his way on any policies, including economic policies. In fact, because it was possible for people to appeal beyond the prime minister to Sonia Gandhi, people just went directly to Sonia Gandhi instead of even telling the prime minister what I had in mind. So all I can say is that for the future people, please remember that when you become prime minister, you need to be a strong political personality. If you're a weak personality who has just been put in there for political convenience, then don't expect too much. Smile, grin, and bear it.
Right. Okay, Swami, great to have you on the show. Thanks as always for taking the time out and joining in with all the insights that you always share.